Having lived in California for over 20 years, I've learned that the difference between Russian and Western cultures run deep. Whether it's the way we approach family, money, or our views on aging and success, the cultural gaps are undeniable. But don't worry, I've got a lot to share and I'll explain it all. If you're curious about how cultural expectations shape our behavior, this video is for you. Alright, let's kick things off with the first rule of communicating with foreigners. If you feel like someone is trying to offend you, chances are it's just a misunderstanding. We come from totally different worlds with totally different cultural codes, so it's no surprise we often read situations through completely different lenses. I'm Elvira an author from the USSR, and I've spent 20 years soaking up the California sun. In that time, I've had plenty of opportunities to see how Russians like me and folks from the West couldn't be more different. So let's dive into this fun cultural journey. We have a huge issue with politeness. Russians are often seen as blunt and overly straightforward. The reason for this is that, first of all, if someone doesn't speak English well, it's hard for them to come up with polite phrases like, "Would you mind explaining this again?" That's not something that translates directly into Russian. You can't just swap English words with Russian ones and make it work. People simply don't know how to use these expressions, so they go without them. When we communicate in Russian, we say exactly what's on our minds, and that's seen not as impoliteness, but as honesty and openness. You don't lie or confuse people. You say what you need or what you like or don't like. Of course, sometimes you can go too far and unintentionally offend someone. But in general, it's normal for a friend to say to another woman, if you want to lose weight, you shouldn't eat at night. This is just a generic statement, just stating a fact. In the West, though, that phrase would come across as dismissive and commanding. Another thing worth noting is that Russians have a very different sense of personal space. Many people in Russia readily share their feelings, judgments, and experiences, basically letting strangers into their inner world. In the West, from my experience, that's not the norm. People discuss either business matters or general topics like political events. In the West, it's frowned upon to show that you are looking for personal happiness. All of that should be kept private so that family and friends don't find out that you are tired of being alone. In Russia, it's absolutely normal. For example, my friend wanted to find a husband, so I, as a good friend, posted her ad and picture on my channel. Who knows? Maybe someone from my audience is a good match. Everyone wins, right? We were both surprised when several people wrote to her outraged. "Did you know your personal information, photo, and email was posted online?" Of course she knew. We came up with this idea together. And for us, there's nothing shameful about it. We are direct people. If you want to solve the problem, solve it. Don't beat around the bush. But what's really hard for Russians to understand is that in the West, people are actually pretty open about their health issues. In Russia, that's an absolute taboo. I remember how shocked I was when one of my acquaintances casually talked to her friends about her husband's diarrhea. And everyone was like, "Oh, yeah, that happened to my husband too." Illness and disability are hidden in Russia. When I first came to the US, I was amazed by how many disabled people there were. In Russia, I had rarely seen any because they simply couldn't leave their homes. There were hardly any ramps for wheelchairs. Besides, who wants to be stared at or pitied? Maybe the situation has improved in recent years, but that's how it used to be. My Russian friends were completely shocked when I wrote on my website that I had breast cancer. I had some doubts. Should I even talk about it? But by then, I'd adopted enough of the American mindset to realize that cancer must be talked about. Everyone thinks it can never happen to them, and that's why they don't get checked on time. During my treatment, I saw many women who came to the doctor when the problem was already very advanced. It's better if I look inappropriate in some people's eyes. But if my story pushes someone to get a mammogram and catch the disease early, it'll be worth it. Russians have a complex relationship with their country. On the one hand, they can endlessly criticize their rulers and complain about the incompetence and clumsiness of officials, but on the other hand, they really don't like it when foreigners point out the flaws of Russia. If you want to have a conversation with a Russian about their country, here's the trick. Imagine you are dealing with a woman who has just gone through a painful divorce. She's on edge, crying 1 minute, yelling the next. The only thing that can calm her down is your reassurance. You're wonderful. You're beautiful. I love you, and everything will be fine. And just like that, she wipes away her tears and say, "Thank you for your understanding me." Even though both of you know that she just went into a fit of jealousy, wrecked her neighbor's apartment, and gave the poor woman a concussion for no reason at all. Notice that this is exactly what Donald Trump did with Putin, and he got immediate concessions. To understand Russians, it's important to realize that there were practically no social science in the USSR. They were all replaced with Marxism-Leninism, which is why the older generation knows nothing about contemporary Western philosophy, sociology, anthropology, etc. It's impossible to explain this to them. Those without higher education simply don't care about these subjects, and those who graduated from Soviet universities believe their education was the best in the world, and who are you to teach them anything? In the 1990s and early 2000s, Russia was flooded with books and lectures translated from English, German, and French. There were excellent teachers, but many of them had to immigrate or leave their academic positions. This is why today's youth are still struggling to grasp these topics. Essentially, unless a person made a conscious effort to dive into political science or everything you studied in high school and college, their worldview will be different. Despite the abundance of churches that have been built across Russia in recent years, Russia is still a deeply secular country. Of course, there are people who are genuinely religious and know the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, and other sacred texts, but they are the minority. There is nothing like the churches in America with their Bible studies, nurseries, playgrounds, and concerts. Magical thinking is quite widespread in Russia. I don't know the exact statistics, but it feels like 90% of my Russian acquaintances believe in horoscopes. Tarot card reading is the most popular subject in online schools. People go to fortune tellers, healers, astrologers, and dive eagerly into the esoteric worlds. This doesn't mean all Russians are like this, but it is a widespread phenomenon. Russians love to claim that money isn't important to them, but that's simply not true. The vast majority of people from the former USSR have experienced unimaginable poverty, something you can't even fathom in the West. After I graduated from university in 1997, my salary was exactly $100 per month. And I was happy because I had a job. For Russians, money represents salvation from all misfortune. If you have money, you'll be able to receive treatment at a good private clinic, not a dilapidated government hospital. If you have an expensive car, the police won't hassle you on the road. If you wear expensive clothes and carry an expensive bag, people will treat you with more respect. You have to show that you have money if you want important people to take you seriously. This is exactly why officials and business people in Russia spend insane amounts of money on status symbols. Take any high ranking female official in Russia and check how much her suit, earrings, and handbag cost. the price will run into tens of thousands of dollars. In the West, especially in Europe, this would seem absurd. But in Russia, it's the norm. In Russia, it's common to inquire about other people's finances and talk about your own income, if not directly, then indirectly. It's perfectly normal to ask someone how much they earn or how much their apartment costs. Of course, this can only be asked of people on the same social level as you. A businessman will easily boast about his income or tell you how cleverly he saved money on something. In Russia, it's totally normal to talk about each other's income early on in dating, just to save time and figure out if you are a good match. As far as I know, if a Russian were to ask a Westerner about their salary, it'd be considered rude. But for Russians, it's hard to grasp. Why pretend money doesn't matter when it clearly does? Let me tell you what I make. Want to know? No? Well, why not? By the way, if you'd like to talk money with me, join my think tank and support this channel. Just hit the button below the video. In recent years, views on gender roles have changed significantly in Russia. There is a part of society that gravitates towards modern Western standards, but old traditions and views still remain. In traditional Russian society, a man is primarily seen as the provider. His responsibilities include earning money and handling tasks that require physical strength. This is even reflected symbolically. For instance, a man carries heavy bags, helps his partner put on her coat, opens doors, and pays for meals and any joint entertainment. In traditional Russia, a woman without a man is vulnerable. If something goes wrong, it's either her parents or her husband who'll swoop in to help. If she has neither, well, she's pretty much left to fend for herself. That's why getting married is such a big deal for Russian women. Some might even put up with an alcoholic or a criminal just to keep that married woman's status intact. The ideal situation for a Russian woman is to get married to a man who's successful, can take care of her and the kids, and treats her like a treasure, someone to be proud of and protect. Some want to earn money, while others prefer to be housewives. A woman's role is to take care of the home. She does all the cooking, while men usually only deal with cooking when it's time for a barbecue. DIY is very common in daily life. People try to do everything themselves because it's cheaper. A man is expected to be able to fix electrical outlets, hang light fixtures, figure out why a faucet is leaking, or bury a dead pet. A woman, on the other hand, is expected to take children to their activities and keep the laundry and the apartment clean. She's also typically the one who handles shopping and maintaining relationships with friends and family. The budget is shared, and it's expected that the man will trust the woman to spend as she sees fit. You can see why discussing money is so important, right? If you don't come to an agreement upfront, someone will be extremely disappointed later. Any official contracts between relatives are viewed negatively, even if you are lending a large sum of money. It's well understood that wills need to be made, but people tend to put it off because they don't want to think about their own death. If relatives ask for help and you can give it, you can't refuse. You are not supposed to charge relatives or friends for work or interest on loans. If you don't want to offer help, you need to come up with a convincing excuse to turn them down. Hiring contractors is normal, but for some reason, hiring a nanny is often met with reluctance. But what's hardest to accept is hiring a cleaning lady. How could you let a stranger come into your apartment and see your mess? In general, it's common to clean up for guests, buy them the best things, and spend more time and effort on them than on yourself. For example, a woman might not bake pies for herself, but she will certainly bake them for guests. Abandoning elderly parents is considered improper. Even if you don't have money, you should call them and help with household tasks. By the way, if any of my viewers are planning to marry a Russian woman, Keep in mind that you'll need to help your close relatives. It's not very expensive because living in Russia is relatively cheap, but your wife won't understand if you refuse to send a small sum to her elderly mother. Of course, there are exceptions, but this is the general norm. When Russians like someone and want to continue getting to know them, they show it openly. They offer to help or invite them over. For Americans, this is often too much, and they immediately start declining. This can be hurtful for Russians. I remember how a very nice doctor was admiring my earrings. I like this woman a lot, and I would love to be friends with her. But when I offered to send her a link where she could buy similar earrings, she immediately declined. To me, this felt very rude, and I decided right away that I didn't want to deal with her anymore. I've encountered similar situations more than once, so over time I stopped trying to establish friendships on my own initiative. Friendship among Russians works differently than it does in the West. Your friends aren't just part of your community, they are your clan. They will rescue you if something bad happens, so building close friendships is very important. Perhaps immigration is harder for Russians than for others because when they move to a foreign country, they lose their clan and feel completely vulnerable. We are naturally distrustful, and deep down, we believe that no one will help us just because. Everyone wants to deceive us. So we have to stay vigilant to avoid falling into a trap. And since people are inherently hostile, this gives rise to the famous Russian cynicism. But this only applies to strangers. Your own people are completely different matter. Friendship starts like this. First, people find a common cause, and they start observing each other. Then they invite each other for tea or coffee. This is a social event during which relationships are built. Very often, Russians invite someone they like over to their home. This is a sign of affection and trust. I don't see this in America. Russian social gatherings look different from Western ones, at least in the circle I move in. If you invite one or two friends over, you sit in the kitchen, drink tea or coffee with chocolates, and talk for hours. The conversations usually revolve around relationships, trips, and culture. For us, it's important to discuss good books, theories, films, and such. If you invite several guests, it's a family affair, a meal during which you eat well and have fun. No one discusses private matters, careers, or politics. Those are topics for a select few close friends. In general, Russians base their expectations on friendship in America on the TV show Friends. But I don't know anyone who has been able to build something like that. Expectations versus reality. You know what shocked me the most about America? I'm a Soviet girl, and I was raised to believe that the government is always the enemy, especially the law enforcement agencies, the police, the army, the border guards, and the Federal Security Service. The only government service that are there for you are emergency medical services and rescuers. All the others exist only to make your life worse. That's why the rule is never get involved with the government. Any contact with officials is a source of stress and suffering. In the 20 years that I've lived in the US, I've had very little interaction with the government. But once, I had to deal with the police. And this time, the government was on my side. It helped me, and the officers were polite and very friendly when speaking to me. The police acted as an older brother that you could turn to for help, and they genuinely stepped in to assist me. I was completely shocked. Nothing serious happened, and no one was hurt. I just needed to handle some paperwork for the police. I was prepared for the worst, thinking they'd either mistreat me or completely wear me out. But instead, a caring female officer sent me helpful links, called me back, and asked if there's anything else she could assist with. Mind blowing. Want more stories? By my novel Russian Treasures, which tells the story of the magical transformation of the Russian Empire into the Empire of Evil. No, it's not fantasy. It's an epic historical novel. The Russian Gone with the Wind.